All right. Good morning, everybody. I am Letitia Saws. I am the Membership and Marketing Manager for the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us today for our April webinar. We are going to be reviewing retirement planning resources for today and the future. And we have Steve, and I'm going to let Steve say his last name after I butcher it, Faggiolly from
Yes,
Strategic
very good.
Retirement
Thank you.
Partners. Yay, I did it. Steve's joining us today, so I'm going to go ahead and let Steve take over. We do have time for questions at the end, so if you have questions, be sure to type them in the chat, and we'll make sure and review them all at the end of the presentation. All right, Steve, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Letitia. And thank you so much, everyone, chamber members, for joining this morning. Uh, as Letitia mentioned, my name is Steve Faggiolly with Strategic Retirement Partners. We joined the Yountville Chamber of Commerce last year. We were introduced through some common clients that we've worked with for many, many years up in Napa Valley. Actually, a little bit of background about myself. Uh, I was born and raised on the peninsula in Redwood City. In 2015, my wife and I bought a home in Browns Valley. So we split time between Napa and the peninsula, but a lot more time in Napa. And when retirement does come around for us, we'll be full-time up in wine country. So really love the area and just wanted to give back to the community up there. And it's such a wonderful network of people. So I'm really honored to be speaking to you today about the retirement planning approach that we look at. So without further ado, a couple of housekeeping items. We're recording this session, so you'll be able to reference it as well. And then additionally, our contact information will be at the end of this deck. So if you ever have any follow-up questions, you want to reach out to us, happy to connect and chat in any capacity that you'd like to. So I'll just start by giving you a little bit of background about our organization, Strategic Retirement Partners. So myself and 5 other partners founded SRP going back to 2015. Previously, we were with another large consulting firm. But what we operate in and act as is independent investment fiduciaries. And I think that's a very important component whenever you're dealing with investments. We really focus on retirement plans. So we work with for-profit organizations, not-for-profit organizations. So I mentioned many winery clients that we work with in Napa Valley, but we also work with large nonprofits in Napa Valley as well, and help them manage their retirement programs, whether 401ks, 403bs, et cetera. But one of the main touch points and kind of the value adds that we bring to the table is just providing education to participants and investors. So today is going to give you a little taste of that, of how we kind of communicate financial programs and understanding how to prepare for our future retirement goals, with our clients and investors. Additionally, we have done pro bono work with the Napa Valley Farm Workers Foundation. So we have created a financial literacy program that's in Spanish exclusively. So I also speak Spanish and been fortunate enough to do that for the last 4 years with that group as well. So just to give you a little background of who we are and who's giving you this information today. Let's just talk a little bit about some of the other touch points that we provide. So obviously we're doing something for the chamber today, but we do provide a quarterly education series, webinar series to all our clients across the country. So whether we're talking about college search, getting started with your money smart for people that are just entering the workforce. We'll talk a little bit about HSAs today, but we'll also talk about financial planning, because what we've come to find out is that we sometimes we focus so much on retirement planning, but there's a lot of competing financial priorities that are really in our lives every day, right? Whether we're trying to put food on the table, we have childcare, we're putting a kid through college, we're caring for a older family member, what have you. We understand that there's a lot of different financial dynamics that are going on. So we want to make sure that we're providing some touch points, some insight, really a value to the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. So that being said, let's switch gears and talk about the focus topics for today. And, we really tried to make this, as for using a wine term, as approachable as possible from a financial perspective, because we know that there's broad swaths of people that are maybe very sophisticated on the investment and retirement side, to people that are just want to get the foundational elements of understanding how money works, how retirement plans work, how investing works. Today is really geared towards that more foundational approach. So today we're going to focus on the three things that matter, right? And we've been doing this. I myself have been doing this over 20 years, going in the financial services industries. I know, Letitia, we were chatting before we jumped on that her father had been in the financial planning arena for many, many years as well. So, we can throw a lot of information, but people tend to focus on three things. Once we start going beyond three things, you start losing it a little bit. So there's the three things that matter with respect to preparing for the future, and we'll cover those. We'll talk about different types of retirement plans. And there's a myriad of different ways and vehicles that you can save for the future. So most of us have heard of IRAs. Most of us have heard of 401ks, but there's some other different types of plans that are out there. I think what we want to do is we want to focus today on the plans that we have heard of, that we know, and what are the kind of the advantages, some of the tax implications surrounding them, those various types of retirement accounts, and how to really leverage them and take advantage of them overall. Investment considerations is important because sometimes people think that they just put money into an IRA and then it magically grows. Well, no, there has to be an underlying investment within those IRAs or 401ks that you're putting your money and investing in that grow according to your risk tolerance and investment time horizons. So we'll talk about some of the different ways that people go about investing within their retirement accounts. We'll talk very briefly about HSA accounts as well. Those are health savings accounts that have really gained a lot of traction here over the last several years because of the various tax advantages associated with it. Oh, by the way, let me go back. When I talk about retirement plans, we're going to talk about Social Security too, because we think it's a really important component of your overall income picture for many people. A lot of people sometimes have a misconception of Social Security, thinking that it was the end-all be-all. It absolutely is not that, but it is a supplement to what you will need to maintain the lifestyle you become accustomed to once you get to retirement. Finally, SRP resources, as I mentioned, our contact information, phone number. We'll show you a QR code that you can scan with your phone to set up a consultation with our team. But just know that, we are chamber members. We want to help you along the way in this journey, help you, your organization, whatever questions you have, feel free to reach out anytime. So let's talk about retirement planning. What exactly is it? It's really all about determining what your retirement income goals and what's needed to achieve those goals. And that's a very simple phrasing, but sometimes when people think about it, they think of it as a very daunting task, right? Sometimes it's hard to look in the mirror or look in your checkbook and look in your kind of in retirement plan statements and say, hey, am I on track? Am I really doing what's right by me and my family and my significant others to make sure that I can get across that retirement, planning finish line comfortably? So retirement planning is a really all-encompassing term, and it's really about the journey. And really the reason why I say that is because, people that we talk to on a day-to-day basis, they're going to be at various stages of their working career, right? And most of the time when we're talking to, say, participants in a 401k plan, for example, most of them are in the accumulation phase. So the accumulation phase is when you're in the prime of your working career, you're earning a living, but you also have the ability and the opportunity to save money for the future, right? So that's where like a 401k or an IRA becomes very important, because we are making money at this stage of our life, the accumulation phase. We need to put that money away for a rainy day, because we all know this, we cannot work forever, right? So at some point in time, we're going to need to live off another source of income. And that's where these retirement plans really come into play. That being said, a lot more of the discussions that I've been having with clients are now really in the transitioning phase and also the decumulation phase, because we've talked about, hey, saving and saving and saving for the last 20 plus years. And now a lot of these people that have been working are saying, hey, listen, I've accumulated a pretty nice nest egg. How am I going to start withdrawing off of this account in kind of a tax efficient manner? I want to be mindful of making sure that the money that I've saved up to this point in time is going to generate enough income for me in the future. And I don't want to run out of this money if possible, right? So it all kind of plays together, the accumulation phase, the transition phase, and the decumulation phase. So depending on where you're at, the conversation is going to be different. But just know that, if you are working with a financial advisor, you have questions about where you're at in your individual situation, you want to work with someone that you can trust, someone that's going to give you prudent advice. And I think that's the most important, kind of component of having maybe a partner to help you along for this ride. And hopefully today, you get some foundational information and then you can build and apply it along the way. So let's talk about the three things that matter. How much should I save, right? And this is just an incredible question, a very open-ended question. And the right answer is, you know, what feels comfortable to you, right? Let's start from a cash flow perspective. Can I put, if I'm just, let's say I'm 25 years old, I'm just getting started, I maybe finished school, I'm in my work, I'm entering the workforce. Can I put, 50, 75 bucks a paycheck into a retirement account, into an IRA, something like that? If I'm in my 30s or 40s, people really have been working maybe for 10 years and they start thinking about it and they're like, hey, listen, I really want to start socking away money because I've been working now for 10 years and I don't know how much long. I mean, I enjoy what I'm doing, but I don't want to do this forever, right? So that's when people start maybe accelerating them out. They start funding for retirement. And then, there's situations where people say, through no fault of their own life circumstances, they didn't start in their 20s and 30s. They get to 35, 40, and they say, oh my gosh, I'm really a little bit later to the game. I want to start saving for the future. And the thing to always remember with respect to retirement accounts is that it's a long game, right? The investment time horizon for retirement income is much longer than we think about. So let's just say, for example, I'm 40 years old. I started saving at 40. I still have about 25 years to accumulate, tax deferred or tax-free income for retirement, right? Say 65 is my retirement age. I got 25 years to sock away some money, right? And then once I get to that retirement age, I need that money to last for another 20, 25 plus years in retirement. So if you think about it that way, this investment, time horizon is much longer than we think. So while you've always heard the mantra, the sooner the better, I will be the first one to say it's never too late to start saving for the future. So focus on the things you can control, right? That is the most important thing. Because as soon as you start thinking, you're like, I have no control over this, then it becomes an uphill battle. So just focus on the things you can do. If you have access to a 401k plan and you're like, hey, you know what? I have a couple young kids. I have to pay for childcare, but I do want to give myself something. Put 5% in, right? Put 6% in. Maybe put as much as the employer is willing to match you if there's an employer matching contribution. But those are the little incremental steps that you can take that pay off huge down the road. So even if I make a contribution increase of 1 or 2%, it doesn't sound like a lot now. It may not impact your lifestyle immediately, but it compounds and grows over time and really pays dividends in the future. The second thing we're going to be talking about today is, what do I want my tax treatment to be? And it's not just the tax treatment now when I'm making a contribution. It's, what do I want the tax treatment of my income to be once I get to retirement? And there's really two main vehicles for doing that. One is kind of a traditional 401k or traditional IRA, and one is going to be a Roth 401k or Roth IRA. So I'm going to dig into the details of the difference between traditional and Roth. And very quickly, one's going to give you a tax benefit now when you contribute to it, and one's going to give you a tax benefit in the future when you can take it out tax-free, which is the Roth. So I'll show you how those both work and how you can maybe leverage those to your advantage, because the Roth is a relatively new introduction via the tax code over the course of the last 17, 18 years in 401ks over the last decade. So we're starting to see a little bit more adoption of the Roth, but it's still relatively new. Maybe about 10 years ago, about 5% of people in 401k plans, for example, were putting money into a Roth. Now it's over 20%. So it's still gaining a lot of traction because people are starting to realize the benefits of what a Roth can do for you. And I'll talk about that today. The final thing is, where do I invest the money, right? So you've decided to save money. You decided how I want the tax advantage for me to work. And then once it's in these accounts, how do I invest the money? And there's a couple different ways to go about doing that as well. We'll talk about the difference, but I also want to discuss an easy way to do it, which is something where we see the inflows of a lot of money in retirement accounts going in. It's called a target date fund. And basically what a target date fund is, a diversified portfolio based on your date of birth and projected retirement age of 65. So I will show you kind of how a target date fund works, but just always know that there's resources out there so you don't have to go it alone, right? Whether you do a kind of a risk or investor profile assessment or something along those lines, there's some great resources to make you feel empowered to make the right decisions with respect to your investments. I know I talk to a lot of extremely intelligent people that are, engineers, winemakers, artists, people that work in construction, and they're excellent at what they do. And then sometimes when we start talking about money, they feel like it's Greek to them. But like I said, there's a lot of resources to make sure that you feel comfortable with the way you're approaching the investment side of investing that money that you're working so hard to save for the future. So let's start with the first type of retirement account. It's an individual retirement account, IRA. And that's an acronym, right? You've heard probably in the past. And what it is, it's a tax advantage retirement savings account, which you can contribute either pre-tax or after-tax money, in which either grows tax deferred or tax free. There's two types of IRAs, okay? There's a traditional IRA where you can put in pre-tax dollars, and that grows tax deferred. When you take that money out, that's when it's taxable as ordinary income. The Roth IRA is basically the exact opposite. So I put after-tax dollars into my Roth IRA. That money goes tax-free. If I had that money in there for 5 years and I get to age 59 and a half, I get to take all that money out, federal and state tax-free. So one thing that I just want to clarify here is that the government is always going to get their tax bite, right? But you get to dictate when that happens. So traditional gives you a tax break for many people that contribute to it in the year that you make the contribution, right? You're getting that deductibility by making that contribution to your traditional IRA. But when you take that money out in the future, that's when you pay taxes on it as ordinary income. You're getting this tax deferred growth over the years, but at some point you're going to pay taxes on it. The Roth is basically the exact opposite, right? So if I put money into a Roth IRA, I've already paid the tax on the money, right? Now that money is growing tax-free in my account. So I get to retirement age. And by the way, the IRS definition of retirement age is 59 and a half. It's not 59, it's not 60, it's 59 and a half. That's our government at work sometimes. So, but if I get to that point, I can take all that money out tax-free from a Roth IRA. So those are a couple of different advantages that you see with an IRA account. A 401k plan is very similar to an IRA, but it's a company-sponsored account. So what it shows here is a 401k plan, is a defined contribution, tax advantage retirement savings plan that is sponsored by an employer, okay? You may have heard of a 403b plan, very similar to a 401k plan, but it's for nonprofit organizations, right? Sometimes you see for universities, hospitals, educational organizations, institutions, right? But a 401k plan is very similar to an IRA, but the contribution limits are much higher than what you can put typically in an IRA. So there's a couple of things that that will kind of differentiate between the two. And oh, by the way, if you have a 401k plans, sometimes there's an employer uh, matching or profit sharing contribution that goes on top of that. So, we find a lot of the time that 401k plans are a little bit more advantageous than IRAs because you can put more money away, and then there may be an employer matching component that is associated with it as well. Let's just take a look at a side-by-side comparison of Roth IRA, traditional IRA, and traditional 401k really quickly. So Roth IRA, let's see who sets it up. In either a Roth or traditional IRA, you set it up. A traditional 401k, for example, your employer would set it up. Who funds it? Like I said, your own money's going into either a Roth or traditional IRA. In a 401k, it may be you and an employer contribution as well. When can you contribute? So anytime, as long as you're earning income into a Roth IRA, traditional IRA the same, and then traditional 401k as long as at your job. What I do want to give a little side note here is that, especially since we are coming off taxes to April 15th as on Monday, you can contribute to a Roth IRA or traditional IRA for 2023 up to the tax filing deadline. So even if it's for 2023, I could contribute $7,000, say, for example, to my Roth or my traditional IRA for last year up to the tax filing deadline of this year, so April 15th, 2024. Or if I file an extension, October 15th of this year. So you have a little bit more flexibility on funding a Roth and an IRA or either Roth or traditional. The 401k contribution has to happen in the calendar year in which you're in because it's done through payroll deduction. So for example, I I work for, General Motors. I have access to a 401k. I can contribute by having a deduction to come right out of my paycheck. But once I get to December 31st, that's the end of it. I can't contribute anymore for 2023. 2024, as soon as I get to January 1st, it starts a new calendar year. So something to be aware of with IRAs versus 401ks. And then when you pay the taxes, you pay the taxes when you contribute to a Roth IRA, right? So you're funding it with after-tax dollars. You've already paid the taxes on that money. Traditional IRA, it's when you take the money out, as I mentioned. And then traditional 401k, also when you take the money out in retirement. By the way, since we are recording this, please consult a tax professional for any given situation. We're not supposed to give tax advice, but this is just kind of giving you the framework of how these qualified plans operate overall from an investment perspective. What you see here is just a couple of other IRS limits associated with how much can I put in these accounts. So traditional and Roth IRA, $7,000 a year, okay? If you're age 50 or older, by the way, I turned 50 this year in January, I can now do a catch-up contribution. So an additional $1,000, so up to $8,000 into either a traditional or a Roth IRA. A SEP IRA, you may have heard of that. That is for that's called a self-employed pension IRA. That's for someone who's generating 1099 income. They're maybe the independent contractor. They have their own business. You can see you can put even higher amounts into a retirement account. And those SEP IRAs are very advantageous for sole proprietors that are earning 1099 income. Because those contributions to your own retirement account are tax deductible as a business expense. So it's kind of a double advantage for people that have access to a SEP IRA. Simple IRAs are for smaller groups, organizations. It's very similar to a company-sponsored retirement account, but it doesn't have a lot of the non-discrimination testing requirements that 401ks have. You can put up to $16,000 a year, plus a $3,500 catch-up. The 401k profit sharing plan, $23,000 a year for 2024. If I'm 50 or older, I can do another 7,500 catch up to if I'm over age 50, so 30,500. Couple things to note. 23,000 is what you can defer yourself into a 401k plan. If there's an employer match or something, it doesn't count against that $23,000 number. That's simply what you can defer out of your own paycheck in either a traditional 401k, Roth 401k, or a combination of the two. The second thing I wanted to point out is the $7,500 catch-up contribution. I told you that I turned 50 in January, but if I turn 50, say on December 29th of this year, I'm still eligible to put that $7,500 catch-up throughout the course of this year. So it's just in the year that you turn 50, you become eligible for the catch up, and then you can spread that contribution out over the course of the year in which you turn 50, so up to 30,500. Health savings account, which we'll touch on a little bit later, uh, you can put $4,150. And if you're a family, you can put up to 8,300. So those amounts are going up. And you'll see that it's really advantageous as well. So maybe if you have access to that, of course, you'd have to have a high deductible healthcare plan. Um, you could use these health savings account to fund one of the fastest growing expenses that we're going to have when we get to retirement, which is healthcare related expense. So HSAs, very powerful. We'll talk about that. The final thing, Coverdell Education Savings Account, $2,000 per child. You don't see those too often anymore. What you often see is more 529 college savings accounts. And they've changed the rules on those recently. Uh, and what, just to give you a little bit of background, a 529 college savings account is a savings account that's works very much like a Roth IRA. You put after-tax dollars in, it grows tax deferred. If you take that money out to use for tuition, any qualified expenses, tuition, room and board, computer, etc., you get to take that money out tax-free. That used to be only for higher education or vocational or trade schools. In the last year and a half, they changed it so you can use 529 accounts for K through 12 educational tuition expenses as well. So a lot more flexibility. And then, by the way, if you don't use that money for higher education, you can then transfer those 529 accounts to a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. So another way to utilize those funds. We're not going to get into that today, but I just want to give you a little bit of a tidbit of other ways that you can start kind of saving money for retirement, not just for you, but for the next generation as well. So let's talk about pre-tax versus Roth. And really the way that we look at it is as an opportunity to balance. We like to say, would you rather pay tax on the seed or the harvest? I'll give traditional 401k as an example. So let's say, for example, I make $60,000 a year and I put $10,000 into my traditional 401k. In the eyes of the IRS, I'm only making $50,000 this year. I reduced my taxable income by $10,000 by putting money into my traditional 401k. So that's the immediate tax benefit of participating in a traditional 401k. Traditional IRA is going to be very similar, but the amount is not as much. But depending on what your income level is, if you make a contribution to a traditional IRA, it's tax deductible. Please consult your tax professional. That's the last time I'm going to say that. What happens is that money goes into that traditional IRA or traditional 401k and it's growing tax deferred. Okay. So you're investing in some type of underlying investment, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, target date funds. And then when I get to retirement age, which is age 59 and a half or later, I start taking money out of my traditional 401k or traditional IRA. That's when I pay the taxes on it. So let's say, for example, I've been putting, $10,000 in my traditional 401k for 30 years, and that's $300,000. It has grown over that time, and now it's worth 750,000, right? When I get to retirement, I don't take all that money out at once, right? I just take out what I need to live off. So say, for example, I need $40,000 a year to supplement any other income that I get, Social Security, et cetera. I'm only taking out the 40,000 and letting the rest of that 750,000 continue to grow tax deferred. Okay. So you don't want to just take it all out once you get to retirement. Just take out what you need to supplement your income and let the rest continue to grow tax deferred. Let's talk about the Roth. Roth is basically the exact opposite of the traditional type of 401k or IRA. So same example, I make $70,000 a year. I put 10,000 in my Roth 401k. In the eyes of the IRS, I'm still making $70,000 this year. No tax break in the year that I contribute to my Roth. However, that money is now growing tax-free, not tax deferred like traditional, tax-free. So now I get to retirement. I'm 59 and a half years of age, and I've had my money in there for 5 years. I get to take all that money out federal and state tax-free when I get to retirement. So, like I said, the government is going to get their tax bite now or in the future, but you get to dictate how that happens. I'll give you an example of how these two types of accounts can interplay together. For example, for the first 20 or so years, I was working, I was saving money in a traditional 401k, maybe a traditional IRA. And then for the last 10 or 15 years of my working career, Roth was introduced. Roth was made available via the IRS tax code. So I started putting money into my Roth account as well. Not as much, right? But enough to create a second pool of money that's going to generate tax-free income in the future. So now I get to retirement. I'm 64, 65, 66 years of age, and I need $60,000 a year to live, for example. Well, I can take 40,000 out of my traditional 401k, for example, and because that's where I save most of my money. I started earlier there. That's where the bulk of it is. So I can afford to draw a little bit more out of that pool. And then I take another 20 out of my Roth 401k because I started a little bit later, maybe a smaller pool to draw. So, but I'm still receiving $60,000 in income between the two accounts, but I'm only paying taxes on the 40, right? Only on the traditional amount. So I can manage my taxable income in retirement more efficiently if I did have the Roth established. So that's just an example of how the Roth can help you manage your taxable versus tax-free income in the future. And that's what we have listed here. So what are the potential Roth benefits? Balancing tax-free growth with tax-deferred growth. Really diversifying the taxation of your retirement savings is really a key consideration there. The third thing is something that people get confused on a lot, right? They say Roth IRA, that's the first thing that rolls off the tongue. But remember, there's a Roth IRA and there's a Roth 401k. If you want to contribute to a Roth IRA and you're a higher income earner, that is, if you're single and your adjusted gross income is over $161,000 a year, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. There's income restrictions that the government imposes that says, listen, your income's too high, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA. If you and your spouse, significant other, are making adjusted gross income of $240,000 or more in 2024, neither of you can contribute to a Roth IRA. These income restrictions do not apply to the Roth 401k. So if you have access to a Roth 401k, a lot of people say, listen, I'm making too much money, I can't do it. Not in the Roth 401k. If have a Roth 401k, it doesn't matter what your income level is, you can still put 23,000 into the Roth 401k if you decide to, or if you're 50 or older, another 30,000 or 30,500 total into the Roth 401k. So there's a couple of different ways to massage the angle on the Roth side of things. And then this graphic that you see at the bottom is typically it's more advantageous for lower income earners and younger people to contribute to a Roth. But I just give you an example of how it kind of flips the script. If you're a higher income earner and you want to create a tax-free bucket of money, you can certainly do it through a Roth 401k. So there's no hard and fast rule. What we typically say is we have a conversation with our participants, our clients, and we ask them 4 or 5 questions, and I can tell you really quickly whether you're a candidate to start maybe considering contributing to the Roth. Here's an example. A lot of people that have just filed their taxes, if you get a tax return, a refund, you've basically overpaid your taxes. You've, in essence, given the government an interest-free loan. So instead of getting a bigger refund, it would behoove you to make Roth 401k contributions instead. So maybe get a smaller refund, but get your retirement income tax-free 15, 20, 30 years down the road. So a lot of different things that you can take a look at, but just give you an example of some of the benefits of Roth versus traditional. Okay, how much should I be saving, right? So we teased that at the beginning, but really a lot of it has to do with how old are you now, right? Obviously, the sooner the better, but it's never too late. What is your projected retirement age? And I think that's really important to note too. Do I plan on retiring at 62? Do I want to retire at 65? Is it like 73? Because what's going to happen is the sooner you retire, the sooner you're going to be living off whatever you've accumulated at that point in time. Not only that, the opportunity to save for the future, the sooner you retire, goes away, right? So money flowing into these retirement accounts stops and money flowing out starts to begin. So obviously, the longer you can push out retirement age, the better. But sometimes it's not really all up to us. What we've seen some reports from JP Morgan that says that most people that are working want to work 65 or beyond. But the reality of what's happening in the United States is that most people are getting to 62 and for one reason or another are leaving the workforce. So either through healthcare related reasons, uh, job, industry consolidation, attrition that may happen. So sometimes it may not be all up to us. But at the end of the day, we want it to be up to us, right? We want to make sure that we've socked away enough money to say, listen, I'm going out on my own terms. And really that's where the impetus and the drive to save for the future really comes from. So, third bullet point we have there is other retirement assets. What's your spouse, partner, significant other doing? Because we have conversations with a lot of people that say, I'm putting money away. I'm getting a full employer match. I got an IRA. I'm like, that's fantastic. What is your significant other doing? And they're like, I think they have access to an account. I don't know if there's a match, what have you. So you want to just make sure that you're both rowing in the same direction with respect to preparing for the future. Lifestyle and expenses in retirement are really going to dictate too. So if you have a lavish lifestyle, that's going to cost more, right? I read a very interesting article a couple of days ago that they were talking about what does your life cost, right? How much does it cost to be you right now? And I think that's really important assessment. And sometimes we don't look in the mirror and do that. And I had to even look in the mirror and say, geez, okay, if I stop now, am I going to, have enough socked away to make sure that I can sustain the lifestyle I've become accustomed to? And that kind of dovetails into that 75%. So experts target about 75% of the final salary that you're earning is what you should be looking to replace. So whether, why do they say 75%? It's well, because you're not commuting anymore. You're not buying lunch every time, you're not maybe buying as many new clothes for work, but you still have some fixed costs that exist, right? Putting food on the table, maybe rent or mortgage, healthcare related expenses. So there's a lot of things that never go away that you need to cover. And then, this is where we start talking about Social Security. Social Security is, a benefit that, for most people that are getting close to retirement, they're going to have a component of their income be Social Security. And the reality is, on the average, Social Security check right now is about $1,800 a month across the country for an individual. It gets up to like $2,600, $2,700 a month for a married couple, but that's about it. So if you say, hey, listen, once I get to retirement, if I'm by myself, I can put food on the table, cover housing, pay for healthcare, maybe go out on a Saturday night for $1,800, then the conversation about saving for retirement is not that important. But if you're like, that's nowhere near the amount that I'm going to need, that's where these programs become of paramount importance, just taking advantage of putting money in an IRA, putting money in a 401k to make sure that we can still, live the way that we've come to expect. So let's talk about Social Security really quick. And I won't go through all the bullet points for the sake of time, but Social Security was established in 1935. We were in the midst of the Great Depression. It was part of the New Deal. And the government said, hey, listen, we got to put a safety net in place so people can put food on the table, maybe a roof over their heads. It was never designed to replace all the income that you need in retirement. And that's sometimes the misconception. It's a supplement, right? So the way that it's funded, it's through payroll tax that's levied on workers and employers. If you're self-employed, you pay both components of that. And amendments have been made over the years to kind of make sure that the plan is sustainable for the long term. I know there's a lot of information on this graphic, but I'll try and distill it down. For anyone born 1954 or earlier, full retirement age was 66 years of age. If I retired at 62, by the way, the earliest you can take Social Security is 62 years of age. If I did that, I would get 75% of my benefit. For every year I waited, I'd get another 8% increased benefit. So if I took Social Security at 70, I'd get 132% of the benefit I was entitled to. And remember, this is like full retirement age. What you've noticed is that the Social Security Administration has started to push retirement age out now. So anyone born in 1960 or later, full retirement age is now 67 years of age. And what you'll notice is that if I take it at age 62, I'm only going to get 70% of the benefit that I'm entitled to if I take it as soon as possible. If I wait for every year past 67, I'll get an 8% increase. And the maximum benefit that I can get at age 70 now is 124%. So why is this happening? We have 11,000 people a day in the United States turning 65, 11,000 a day. So, the baby boomer generation, a lot of people are coming into those retirement years, and it's taxing, for lack of a better term, the system. You have about 2 trillion, but it's invested in treasury bills, uh, government securities that have not grown significantly for the last decade because of a historically low interest rate environment. So Social Security is something that is going to have to change. A lot of Washington don't want to touch that third rail um, as well, but they don't want it to go away. So you'll see it probably thinned out for people that are in maybe their 40s or 50s. It's going to be look pretty very similar to this. 20s and 30s, we'll see what happens overall. But like I said, just keep in mind that Social Security is just kind of designed to supplement the income that you needed. By the way, Social Security is going to increase by 3.2% in 2024. Last year in 2023, we saw the biggest increase that we've seen in 2 decades because of inflation, up 8.7%. And then you see a couple of other changes there as well. But Social Security is an animal unto itself, right? There's so many permutations. I heard that there's over 1,000 different permutations of how a married couple can take Social Security benefits over the course of their lifetime. A lot of things that we can talk about there, but we have some additional resources if you want to dig into that a little bit further. I'm getting close to about 15 minutes out from the end, so I just want to make sure that I kind of cover this, but I'll do it a little bit more efficiently. So investment paths, right? There's typically 2 ways that you can invest the money that you have in an IRA or in a 401k. The first one is to select your own, right? Pick some stocks, pick some bonds, pick a mutual fund that is a diversified selection of different types of investments. Or I can pick a target date fund. And a target date fund is a diversified portfolio that's professionally managed based on your date of birth and projected retirement age of 65. So here's an example of what a target date fund is. And the reason why this is important is because we see about 80% of all new money going into retirement accounts going into these target date funds. So the way that it works is, as you can see, if I'm 25 years old, this dark green is US equities. That's stock of US companies. And let me just level set really quickly. What is stock? Stock is ownership of a company, right? So if I own stock in Microsoft, I'm an owner of Microsoft. I'm not Bill Gates, but I participate in the ups and downs of the value of the company. Non-US equities is companies based outside the United States. Samsung, Nestle, Toyota, okay? Still ownership of those companies. That blue line is bonds. Bonds is otherwise known as fixed income. It is not ownership of a company. It is a creditor of a company or organization. So let's say, for example, I own a bond in General Motors. I will give them $5,000. They can use that money to operate any way they like. But in exchange for that, they're going to give me a 5% interest for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, I get that $5,000 back. So typically a more conservative strategy. What you can see here is how target date funds work is that it's going to be very equity heavy or stock heavy early on for the first 20 or so years. And then it's going to get progressively more conservative for you automatically as you get closer to retirement. So it's kind of a set it and forget it, but it is a very efficient approach to investing because it takes the emotion out of it. And at the end of the day, we're human, right? And sometimes we stub our toe on the way that we approach investing. So if you're like, hey, listen, I don't have the time or inclination or maybe the discipline to just let this money work for me, target date fund is an incredible solution overall. Going back to building it yourself, remember, you don't have to do it alone. Here's an example of an investor profile assessment that we can send anyone who's interested. It's a 10-question fillable PDF that just gives you a score, like how old are you, what's your risk tolerance, what's your risk appetite, and then it'll provide you with a sample portfolio that you can build out of various stocks or mutual funds as well. So great resource, very easy to use. Really quickly on the market, the market doesn't go up in a straight line. I think we all know that. What you see here on the left is what 2020 happened in 2022, US equities, world equities down. On the right is what happened in 2023. And then you've seen a continuation of that so far in 2024. Obviously, the last couple of weeks, if you're paying close attention, we've seen a little bit of pullback, profit taking. But what has happened is that historically, the stock market has an upward bias. but it doesn't always go up in a straight line. So one of the things that we always talk about is dollar cost averaging. This is the beauty of contributing on a consistent basis to a retirement account, whether I'm putting $100 a month into my IRA or I'm putting, $500 a month, a pay period in my 401k. You have an opportunity to either buy ownership of a stock at one time, for example, $3,000, I buy it all at once, or I can spread that $3,000 over the course of 6 months. If I bought all at once, I'd buy 1,500 shares at $2 a pop. If I bought it over time and the market goes up and goes down, I'm actually accumulating more shares at a cheaper price. So I end up with 2,000 shares at $1.50 a pop. So for people that are investing in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and the market goes up and it goes down, you look at the downdraft in the market as a buying opportunity, the opportunity to accumulate more shares of these companies that we're using on a day-to-day basis at a cheaper price. For people that are closer to retirement, we want to avoid those fluctuations. So we reduce risk on the investment side of things, and we protect to the downside. So everyone's going to be different. Everyone's in a different situation, but it gives you an idea of how to take advantage of that. The final thing is we did a webinar with BlackRock 2 weeks ago that I hosted for all our clients across the country. And since we're in an election year, and a somewhat polarized political environment, you kind of take a look at what the market has done, whether a Democrat or a Republican has been in place. And if you invested $1,000 in 1926, it would be worth 14.5 million. Obviously, we all don't have that much time to invest, but you do see the upward bias. The final thing I'll say about this is that the S&P 500 has been around for about 23 presidential cycles. It's been positive 19 of those 23. And out of the 4 that weren't, it was 2000, Y2K, 2008, the Great Recession. So a couple of other macroeconomic factors that factored into the underperformance. But right, don't let your politics kind of drive the way that you invest overall. Health savings account, talk very briefly on this. It's a tax advantage account for individuals with high deductible health plans to help you save medical expenses that those plans do not cover. But the beauty of these HSA, and we're starting to see a lot of traction, is that the money you put in is tax deductible up to the legal amount. The money grows tax deferred. So first benefit, tax deductible contribution or pre-tax contribution, tax deferred growth on the money. When you take that money out for a qualified medical expense, tax free. So you're seeing really a demand for these accounts, because what you can do is, say, for example, you're in your 40s or 50s and you have an HSA, you can put this money, and if you don't use it, you can wait until 65, 70 and take the money out when you get to retirement age to cover the healthcare expenses and you can still take it out tax-free as long as it's for these qualified events. So there's no rush to take it out. And that's why you're seeing these really kind of coupled very nicely with IRAs and 401ks. The final housekeeping item before I open this up to questions for the group is beneficiary designations, right? One of the most important things that we see is that people don't have a beneficiary designation for these retirement accounts. And it's a shame when something unforeseen happens. So if you're single, you can put whoever you want. If you're married, typically your spouse is your primary beneficiary because of the tax advantages associated with it. If you have children, you can put them as a contingent beneficiary or a charitable organization. But you've worked so hard for this money. If something happens, make sure it goes to the people that you intended to. So to wrap up my retirement action plan, how much can you contribute? Does it make sense for me to explore Roth versus traditional or pre-tax contributions? Choosing my investments, making sure that you understand how you're investing that money. Does this align with your individual risk tolerance and investment time horizon? Don't forget to designate the beneficiaries, as I mentioned, and I really can't stress that enough. If you have life insurance, if you have other things that have some type of beneficiary requirement, please go take a look at it as a follow-up. Social Security and HSA. Here is our contact information. If you scan that QR code, it brings you to like a bookings link where you can set up a 15-minute consultation with our team. You can always give us a call, shoot myself or my partner Todd White an email. We'll be happy to chat. I'll put this disclosure up really quick and then go back to this contact page. But with that, I'll hand it back over to Letitia and then open it up to the group if there's any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. That was Great. I'm a total nerd about stuff like this, so I love getting all this information. A lot of great information. And I would highly recommend if anybody has further questions, please reach out to Steve. It's always great to work with a professional and get answers to the questions that you have. So I'm happy to open up to questions right now. If anybody has questions, I don't have any in the chat yet. So if you have questions, just make sure to unmute yourself and happy to get those answered for you. Any questions, guys? I have a question, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, please do, Letitia. Yeah.
Yeah, so with the HSA accounts, is that something I had always been under the impression that was something that had to be through an employer? Is that something you can do on your own?
Yes, that's a great question. So it typically is through an employer. So, but I think they've opened it up. If you left an employer and had an HSA, you can roll it over and maintain the
Okay.
HSA yourself. But I think they're beginning to open it up so you can do it. You can have an HSA account yourself. But that's a great question, and I can send that as a follow-up
Yeah.
to confirm because. There's so much demand for that type of account that's just the ability to grow that money tax-free for use of that. The reality is that the fastest growing expense that most people in retirement face is healthcare.
Yeah.
So we've had an inflationary pressure here for like 7, 8 years, right? But if you go back the last decade, healthcare costs have gone up 8.5% on average for the last decade. So it's just getting more expensive. So HSA demand is much higher, but that's a fantastic question. I can confirm that. But I know that you can keep it once you've
Once
established
you
it.
leave an employer
I'll find if you can set it up individually.
on your
But
own.
you do have to have that high deductible healthcare plan in order to utilize that. So if you have like an HMO or something along those lines or Kaiser, not necessarily applicable to utilize those accounts.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, we will be sure to share all the contact information. If anybody has any questions or follow up and can't get a hold of Steve or didn't scan things, just reach out to Whitney or I. We're happy to connect you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next event. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.